Switching to the offensive side of things here for the Steelers. Um, I want to get your opinion on some things. Obviously, from a play calling perspective, I really didn't think it was like all that different. But what I think like is the reason that we have to give a little bit of a cap tip to Canada is just the game plan in general. I thought they did some different things that we haven't seen. They ran from shotgun, they used play action, they got Kenny out in the bootleg. They did things that like make sense for a Kenny Pickett offense, things that he excelled out at Pitt. And for a struggling quarterback, I think it kind of makes sense to play to their strengths. I mean, in general, it kind of makes sense to do that. But in this game, it seemed like there was an attention to detail, and this is what we want to do. So let's go out there and do it. Like, it felt like they had a game plan. They stuck to it, and we at least saw glimpses of what this offense could be. I looked at that one drive to where it was 16-7. They scored the Freiermuth touchdown to make it 23-7. That drive right there had literally everything that you want to see. Like, to me, that is the ceiling of what this offense could be. We saw play action. We saw them use motion on a passing play. We saw them blocking well out in space on that little Jaylen Warren dump off. We saw them use the middle of the field, and then we saw a play action bootleg from Kenny with a wide open Freiermuth in the end zone to finish it off. So to me, I looked at this and was like, okay, from a play calling perspective, I don't know that it was much different from week 1 or week 2, but from like an execution and game plan perspective, I think you got to tip your cap a little bit to what this offense was able to do.
I think you do too. I think they set up the play action perfectly, especially early on. Even if the run game wasn't going, they were still going to be determined to run.
There's people that are like, I don't get it, because like the data, we have enough data at this point, like 10 years worth of it, to show us that while if you can run the ball, the play action can be more effective, but you don't need to be able to run the ball to be able to run play action. Matt Canada said in a statement last week that that's why they don't use more play actions, because they haven't been able to establish the run. Again, there's 10 years of data that shows us you don't necessarily need to be able to run the football to run play action. Doesn't hurt. But
well, I think they proved that on Sunday night, because it's not like they were lighting up the sticks with the run game early on. I think that, but they were able to show an identity to the Raiders defense, and it got them to open up that play action. And that drive that you were talking about on that Pat Freiermuth touchdown, this might be a little bit of exaggeration, but I think that might be the peak that we've seen so far of what the offense looks like under Kenny Pickett. I think that what you've seen,
that entire drive on X and basically said the same thing. I didn't say, I just said in some time, but certainly of the Pickett Canada marriage. But I almost feel like since, Ben, like going back to all of last season, Mitch or Kenny, I would go back to, since Ben was here, that we've seen a drive like that.
Yeah. And I mean, like, I don't know, maybe it's tough because you did have the drive against the Raiders last year that led to the George Pickett touchdown, and then the Najee Harris touchdown late in the game. It was those 2-minute drills.
That's what Allen said. Outside of 2 minutes, it was their most impressive drive.
Yeah, I just think you saw everything that you wanted to see, and you topped it off with a touchdown to Pat Freiermuth, the one we wanted to get going into the game. So I'm happy they got him scored as well. I definitely still think that there's individual play calls throughout the game that are going to happen that you still question. But overall, I think the identity of the offense was pretty clear in what they were trying to do in this game. And I do think that there was a big improvement from what we saw, definitely from week 1 to week 2, but then from week 2 to week 3, I didn't come away from this game still scratching my head about how are we going to operate offensively. I think you started to see more of an identity, and you started to see a better Kenny Pickett play. I thought he was more accurate in this game. There were still some of the pocket issues where he started to scramble from pressure that wasn't necessarily there yet. I still think that he's missing throws to not necessarily throws that he's making, but just not seeing guys that are open in some of his progressions. But overall, this is a more comfortable conversation I'm having about Kenny Pickett that I don't have to worry about, or at least I'm not worrying about this week where the accuracy was, because that's something that we were always reliable with Kenny Pickett. And we were questioning through the first 2 weeks, like, why are some of these throws behind guys in the dirt? It was something that we hadn't really seen from him, even going back to college. And so to be able to see him make that progression to get to this point where, there's still some things he needs to work on, but at least his arm looked good. And I thought a lot of his passes looked good whenever he was making those. So the offense left me with a better taste in my mouth this week than definitely did after week 1 and week 2. And it gives me more confidence moving forward that, like what I said last week and why I predicted the Steelers to win this game, I just feel like you're going to keep chipping away at it. It's not going to suddenly flip a switch and be perfect from one game to the next, but you're going to continue to see those progressions as the season moves along. And I think that as you get more confidence, and not necessarily confidence. Confidence was never an issue with Kenny, but when he figures out, like, oh, I don't need to escape the pocket right now. I can still sit in the pocket when there's no pressure on me right just a second. And when he gets better at those progressions, I think this offense can actually be pretty decent and closer to what we thought it could be with the weapons that it has.
Yeah, I think that a lot of things that I was questioning for the first 2 weeks, we got answers on. Like it just makes it all that much more odd the way that Kenny looked in week 1 and week 2. Not saying that he's where, they need to be Super Bowl contenders or there's not more within there. I think that there's still obviously a ton of room for improvement, but he looked about where you would expect him to. I feel like where we expect Kenny Pickett to be, and he looked like a guy that you can win with. Like this Steelers team, with the defense they have, with the complement of skill players they have and everything like that, they don't need him to be a world beater, but they need him to be what he was on Sunday night. What he was on Sunday night, play action, 6 of 8, 61 yards, 4 first downs, 135.4 passer rating on play action. Again, doing things like that are playing to his strengths. I think that he looked obviously more accurate. I think the big thing too, going back to like doing some things with a bootleg and stuff like that, he was making plays with his legs. I know he had that one really long run that got called back. He was like, all right, screw it, I'll do it again. Gets out again and runs for a first down on the very next play. Using his legs, whether that was actually taking off or just extending some plays, I think that was something that had been missing through the first 2 weeks as well. So I thought he looked a lot more comfortable. It gives me a lot more reason for hope going forward for this offense, where they're going to be. You look at what he did, 10 plus yards down the field as well, 6 for 10, 142 yards and 2 touchdowns on plays 10 plus yards down the field. That's pretty solid. Again, you can win with that. If this offense isn't going to be consistent enough to constantly be like nickel and diming down the field and then be really good in the red zone, they're going to need to find some explosive plays. They have 2 70+ yard touchdowns on the season, which is pretty crazy. Kenny actually has the 2 longest touchdown passes on the year by any quarterback. His touchdown
really?
to George Pickens in week 2 and his touchdown to Calvin Austin on Sunday Night Football this past week. That play to Calvin Austin, I think, came at the perfect time for this offense. That the Raiders had already scored in this one. The offense was kind of looking the exact same like it has through week 1 and week 2. And then Kenny hits that big shot, which, by the way, man, Jaylen Warren on that blitz pickup with that stunt, or I don't know if it was necessarily like a blitz, that stunt from Crosby where he's looping around towards the middle of the offensive line. He was about to come pretty clean on Kenny. That sounded terrible. Pause. He was about to get home on Kenny, and Jaylen Warren picks him up and lets him rip one down the middle of the field to Calvin. This is the benefit of no longer being with a network, by the way. Rips it down to Calvin Austin for a long touchdown. My question to you is, and we're just going to keep going forward, and that's going to be a nice little nugget for people. Do you think Calvin Austin, even when Deontay Johnson comes back, has like a role within this offense? I was asking Alan about this. We're not sure we're going to see like 4 receivers, but could it maybe be more Calvin Austin than we expected and less Allen Robinson than we expected when Deontay Johnson comes back?
I think it could, because Calvin Austin does something that none of the other receivers do. Each of them have their own things that they're really good at. Like, right. So Deontay, when he comes back, he's the best route runner of the team. He finds the open space easier than anybody on the Steelers. George Pickens, for example, he's just kind of like the hybrid, like perfect mold of what you would think of a wide receiver, big outside guy that can just is a dog that can go up and grab it. But he's also good with route running too. The thing with Calvin Austin that he has that the others don't have, he can just take the top off of defense. And we saw that on that touchdown. None of those guys have that breakaway speed to be able to just like say, I'm running a 9. I'm just going free, and you're going to throw the ball to me, and I'm going to go catch it. That's basically what he was doing. So I do think that there's a space in the offense, even when Deontay comes back. And even if they do continue to use Allen Robinson too, I think Allen Robinson is still valuable to the team, where you'd want to use all four of those guys. And I don't think it's going to be as prominent of a role for Calvin Austin, but I still think that there's ways that they can utilize that speed, because that is the main thing that he has where you're like, wow, that's something that no one else has when you watch him.
We've been
No,
looking
none
for
of
that
our
for
other
years.
players have that. So we're probably talking about going back towards like maybe even like Mike Wallace, if we're talking about just like flat out, I'm running a straight line and you're going to throw it to me.
I think Martavis had a little bit of that to
Martavis,
him.
yeah.
Yeah, like that explosive, if you put the ball in his hands at any moment, he could take it to the house. I think he was the last player on the roster like that. Very different in terms of the build of those two, but just like the explosive play creation. That play, thinking back on it though, with Calvin Austin's hilarious. The Raiders are playing single high safety, shading towards George Pickens, and it's Marcus Peters one-on-one with Calvin. Marcus Peters has done some great things in this league. He ain't keeping up with Calvin Austin.
Yeah, no, I don't think there's any DB in the league that is going to be able to make that transition to be able to not only be able to keep up with the guy, but to be able to even remain remotely close. I feel like there's such an advantage when you're a guy like Calvin Austin in that situation where you're running a go ball and the DB has to flip his hips and immediately start running the other way. Otherwise, he's not coming up to you. If he moves backwards, if he like backpedals any time, you've already won, because he's not going to be able to transition that well.
I want to see when we play Cincy a rep where DJ Turner lines up against Calvin Austin. DJ Turner's like the one corner in the league that could probably step for step go with Calvin Austin. I would love to see him, but again, you're like, you can't be backpedaling though. Like he's gonna have any corner in the league is gonna have to give cushion that to Calvin, because you can't, you can't let him get behind. He's gonna get behind you if you're back.
This is gonna be a YouTube exclusive. You're gonna have to be set up like this. like if you are a DB and you are playing you're playing like a stance like man, where you're standing forward, you already lost. You're basically going to have to open up your stance and already be ready to just turn and go. Because if that's what's going to take to be able to keep up with him, otherwise he's just going to run straight past you. You're not going to be able to do it smooth enough that you can transition your hips like that.
Like he did on Sunday night. Yeah. I think that he has to be a part of this offense, even when Deontay Johnson comes back. It's going to be interesting to see like to the level that is, but you need that explosive player at like somewhere within that offense and create touches for him. So, that'll be interesting to see too. The one thing that still, I can't figure out why this run game is as bad as it is. Even like Najee had 65 yards in this game. He had 12 yards over expected. Najee Harris was actually good in this game, but it's not going to look like it because of how bad the offensive line was. Jaylen Warren had negative yards above expected, so he wasn't good as a runner. He made his mark in the receiving game, which is typically going to be the case. But this offensive line, it's so hard to figure out. This should have been a game where you look at the Raiders outside of Max Crosby, not another household name on that defense. You would have thought, with the guard duo that the Steelers have, I actually thought Seumalo he looked more like the player that they thought they were bringing in free agency. He was the one guy I thought on the offensive line was okay. But man, I can't figure out why things are so bad right now with the run game.
I don't know what it is either. And man, you're preaching to the choir, because I'm watching the Steelers who can't run the ball. As many of you listen to the show, I'm a huge BYU fan. They're averaging 2.5 yards per carry on the season. It's been abysmal watching my teams run the football this season. And it's hard for me to blame the running backs on either of my teams. It's hard for me to really look at what Najee Harris or Jaylen Warren are doing and really blame them for the woes of the run game. I think the only thing that you could say with like Najee or really any of the running backs for the Steelers, I wish they would just like make a decision and go. Sometimes I feel like they get caught up into I don't know where to go because there is nowhere to go. And then they kind of, I don't know, say they necessarily lose yardage from that, but like they don't gain as much as they possibly could. But I feel like even if there's nowhere to go, just hit the hole as hard as you can.
Did you remember the play on Sunday night where Najee broke 5 tackles, like literally threw somebody into the ground, broke 5 tackles to be able to lose 4 yards?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, that's what I mean. And
Well, and
that's what
that's
I'm saying with like the yards above
another
expected.
thing too is like I feel like not in just this game, but like the Cleveland and the San Francisco game, it's not like they're always stacking the box too. I feel like they're not, and the run game is still not operating to the best of its ability. And I feel like that
Yeah.
starts with the offensive line at that case. If they're not stacking 8 guys in the box and you can't run the football, how am I not supposed to just instantly look to the line and say like you get no push, you're losing the battle in the trenches, and that's why you can't gain a yard. I mean, obviously Najee averaged 3.4 yards per carry in this game, but a lot of that was because of the fight after contact of what Najee was doing.
Yeah. I understand too. Something else I wanted to bring up that was so important to me. Like I was sitting in my basement. This is, by the way, the first game since they lost to the Broncos in 2018 that I watched in my basement because my niece and nephew were sleeping over. They obviously have school on Monday, so my dad and I had to watch in the basement. 1-0 down here. People are gonna say I should probably just watch every game going forward down here. But what was I saying? Oh, I was literally like, please, please, please hit one of these corners with a double move, do play action, something, because these corners were cheating on every single play, knowing that the Steelers were just running curls and short outs and this short passing game crap, that they were just sitting on these routes. And if somebody would have hit them with a double move or something, they would have been running naked down the field. And I kept waiting for it to happen.
Everybody wants to bring back Ben as an OC. No, we're not going to bring him back to be an OC. We're not going to bring him back to be a quarterback's coach. We're going to bring him back for one thing only. We need you to teach Kenny how to pump fake like you did. And we're going to use these double moves to our advantage. That's how they're going to open up that pass game with the double moves. Kenny needs to learn. I don't know. Maybe he knows how to pump fake well. To be honest, I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, I don't know that I've really
I don't really see him do it. So they need, well, then again, I don't know. Small hands.
Or no, wait.
They need some extra adhesive on that glove. I don't know.
What game was it? It was towards the end of last season, I think. I don't know if it was that Raiders game on the touchdown to Pickens or if it was the Browns one with the touchdown to Pickens. But like his pump fake isn't like with the ball. It's almost like a shoulder thing, like a shoulder torque.
Yeah,
but
I don't know
which one of those.
I don't know if you need to kind of like tuck the ball against your forearm or do something. I know you got small hands. We're gonna have to rub some extra adhesive on the glove, but
yeah,
we got to teach you how to pump fake and really utilize those double moves with the receivers. We're just giving you options right now. Okay.
Yeah, we know Kenny listens. I don't think he watches, but I think he listens. Pretty sure. So